In 1989, Theodore Bundy died in the electric chair on death row. His case was a long and arduous process, heavily televised and fascinated over due to the nature of his character. Bundy was a psychopath, an infamous deceiver, and an egomaniac, having repeatedly covered up unspeakable crimes, dodged arrests, broken out of prison twice, and even manipulated the judicial system to stand as his own counsel in the courtroom at one time, arguing in his own defence. It was the most publicised crime narrative in the media at the time, during which Bundy depicted himself as an innocent, nobly fighting his case in a long trail of wrongful accusations from police incompetence. Days before his execution, Bundy finally confessed to the murders and grotesque mutilations of over 30 women. This case has gone on to be documented as one of the most interesting criminal events of the 20th century, and in January of this year, Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, a 4-part Netflix docu-series that recounted the events as they unfolded, using interviews, archived stock footage, and recordings of Bundy himself, was released to heightened interest. I myself watched the series and found it to be genuinely fascinating and well done. Solid editing, a shocking story that I, up until then, had never been made aware of, and a tasteful chronicling of just how desperately broken and in need of an upgrade the criminal prevention system once was. That and the sheer absurdity of the man successfully managing to twist the case in his own egotistical favour, showing up to the courtroom suited, booted and questioning witnesses like nothing was wrong, is just so ridiculous that it needs to be seen to be believed. Now, Joe Berlinger, the same director of the Ted Bundy tapes, has partnered with a variety of production companies to bring us Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, based on the memoir The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy, penned by Bundy's longtime girlfriend, Elizabeth Kendall. The film stars Zac Efron as Bundy and Lily Collins as Kendall, with supporting roles by Haley Joel Osment, Jim Parsons and John Malkovich. The story follows the two characters throughout the 20-odd years of their relationship, from initial meeting to their final encounter at death row. There are a number of artistically interesting avenues to explore in a Ted Bundy biopic, particularly in the idea of a self-made public image concocted by a deranged serial killer, and thankfully Efron really does shine in that respect. His natural charm and charisma does well to concede the subtle psychopath lying underneath, giving off a genuine warmth and a sympathetic quality that helps to evoke what I'm sure was the same sort of deceitful response that the real man garnered from viewers all over America. The performance works so well in fact that it might even have left audiences unfamiliar with the story genuinely curious as to Bundy's true nature, provided the editing not kick that entire idea in the balls, which of course it does, bringing us to the first of the film's shortcomings, and that is the ways in which it's been structured and cut. From the word go, we open on the aforementioned death row meeting between the two main characters, only to then immediately cue us into the start of the story as flashback. Quite frankly, it feels like some kind of reaction to test audience screenings. Grab the viewer's attention immediately so that they can't say nothing happens in the first 10 minutes. It's a shame, because all it does is give away, before the film even tries to appeal to his potential humanity, that there's something up with Ted, or else he wouldn't currently be behind bars. By the time we're in the past watching the characters meet for the first time only seconds later, in what is actually the start of the story, we already distrust him. As it continues, the film proceeds to essentially compact 20 years worth of crimes, accusations and courtroom trials into just under an hour and a half, often never showing the originating event, or even just contextualizing how deep into the case we're supposed to be. And the results come off confusing and disorientating because of it. Like, sure, for the sake of the film's thematic angle, don't explicitly show us Bundy beating some poor woman to death. And side note, what little we do see when it finally comes to it is actually done rather tastefully, but at least tell us if this is the first, third or fourth time he's being taken into police custody. You can still maintain the uncertainty of his character and save the truth for the end, whilst being clear on where we're supposed to be in the story. Something tells me that Berlinger is expecting his audience to have already watched his docuseries in anticipation of the movie, and even if you could hypothetically argue that one should be expected to do that, you can't. I watched Conversations with a Killer only a couple of months ago, and I was still losing track of things. This then kind of naturally leads into the film's secondary, more prominent issue, narrative perspective. Despite being based on a book written by his then-girlfriend, the filmmakers can't quite seem to decide who we're supposed to be seeing these events through the eyes of. In the film's promotion, we were told it's that of Elizabeth Kendall, hence the trailer's bold decision to depict Bundy as a sexy, charming heartthrob, supposedly someone who couldn't possibly be a murderer. Makes sense if the movie's hook is that we're seeing Bundy through the eyes of those he deceived. However, in the finished film, we seem to spend far more time with Ted himself, while Collins, who gives a great performance whenever she's on screen, is largely pushed to the sidelines to be called back whenever the film decides it would like to use her again. Whether the idea is to depict Ted as the way Liz sees him or the way that Ted sees himself, both of which have potential, the problem is that the filmmakers are trying to frame the story from one of those perspectives whilst subsequently withholding information about it until the very end, and in doing so, half-asses both. You can't have your cake and eat it too. To the piece's credit, it does manage to successfully explore, without necessarily answering, the question that is Bundy's unique relationship with Elizabeth Kendall. In reality, Ted never physically or sexually assaulted Liz, and the irresistible question of why, when he did so many others, works as an interesting backbone to hang a lot of the narrative around. In many sequences, Liz is framed as an enigma that Ted just can't crack, and the inference of his undying quest to solve that mystery, almost as if he feels the pull to a regular life of an average man in love, as a form of introspection, is the film's most interesting take on the events. Undoubtedly, Berlinger's vision shines brightest towards the movie's end. From a steady close-in on Ted as his death sentence is carried out, showing Ephron's range as a performer, to the appropriately uncomfortable slow burn of a finale, in which all is revealed, the whole thing is shot and edited with a tragic suspense that genuinely leaves you with a feeling of unease. There's a really great struggle conveyed behind Ephron's eyes that feels as temptingly sympathetic as it does deceitfully evil. Which feeling should you trust? The film kinda makes the appropriate choice in telling you. In terms of the rest of the cast, John Malkovich conveys a nice amount of charisma as Judge Cowart, and Haley Joel Osment does the best with what little he's given as Liz's new boyfriend. If there's any name that falls flat, however, it's Jim Parsons, playing Bundy's opposition in the courtroom. To be frank, the man's been playing Sheldon Cooper for too long and has no idea how to play a character that's not a socially inept monotone robot. The tragedy of any artistic product which bases its material on an egomaniac is exactly that. Not to get too deep, but if you believe in an afterlife, you might be the kind of person to boycott Extremely Wicked purely based off the idea that you're somehow playing into Bundy's absurd call for attention. And while I think the film makes an admirable attempt at exploring these events without necessarily making him the hero of his own story, I do think that philosophically, his egomania brings about a greater responsibility to tackle this in a manner that does it true justice. And while I think that Conversations with a Killer did that quite well, I'm not so sure that this does. Despite its flourishes of stylistic flair, a pace that doesn't drag, and a strong lead, Berlinger's biopic sadly feels lacking for a personality as fascinating as Ted Bundy's. Cheers for watching everyone, please feel free to comment and give the review a like, it always helps. Please also be aware that you can read this review as a written article via my website blog, which I will provide below. And as always, if you like this video, you can subscribe to the channel for more. Thank you.